Okay, excellent. Hello and welcome. My name is Lila Yassine, or DJ Yassine, as I'm known on GitHub, and I will be your MC today. As Hal already kindly announced, please be advised that this call will be recorded. And if you do not consent to being recorded, please leave the meeting now. All right, great. Let's go ahead and get started. So here is a high level of our agenda, kicking it off with the double J with web task split. So I will go ahead and migrate over to that slide and hand it over to Jake.
Hey folks, so it'll be super quick. With the most recent release, we did move AWX to a split deployment architecture. So we have now a web pod and a task pod. There was some work that went in for this on the AWX side, mainly around how we handle WS Relay. We work some stuff for WS Relay along with our syslog and how we cache settings and stuff like that. The big change, or for folks who want to use it or utilize it or don't want to utilize it, comes with the operator. We added a few new things into the spec and CRD for AWX there. Any functionality change that if you want to keep everything the same, scale by 1, etc., you can still do that. None of that changes. The main changes that we added were around scaling web and task replicas separately. So I wanted to go over that logic just quickly. I'll see if I can open up the PR here. 1218. Just going to pull here. My apologies. But this logic goes across all of anything that we've added. So any parameters, stuff like that. So tolerations, affinity, anything like that. The just straight parameters or just affinity, just the toleration will apply across the entire both deployments. So it will go to the web and the task deployments. If you preface any of the parameters, just like you would replicas, so same thing, if you just change replicas, it'll scale everything. It'll scale web and task. If you preface any parameter with web or task, it will overwrite the relative deployment. So if you change web replicas, it'll only scale the web deployments replicas. Same for task, etc. So the logic is if it's what it was before, just replicas, it will stay the same. But if you pass either web or task, it will overwrite the existing replicas that is on that deployment itself. I think that's all I had. Oh, and then a big thank you, especially for all the community members that are opening issues and finding issues in this feature. This is super helpful. Some stuff we didn't even see, some stuff we saw, and then people started pointing at it a lot harder. So it's a big thank you for that, especially folks who are also contributing fixes. It's very, very helpful and very, very well needed. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Jake. So next on the docket, we have Alan discussing constructed inventory. And Alan, if you are ready, I will go ahead and pass it off to you.
Hey, I'm sorry, I forgot this meeting was coming. I'm not so prepared for it. But we have content out there that we're going to try to make more available. I can try to follow up with an email or something along those lines here. But this, I believe this is out now in the latest release, and it's a completely different approach from what smart inventories were. It's available in the general drop down as you go to add an inventory, and you can put in the config to create groups and host vars, and then that's what you can put in there is documented as a general Ansible built-in plugin, which is called constructed as an inventory plugin, and then you can use the limit field to reduce the number of hosts that you're getting, which is the idea of smart inventory, that you put in a host filter so that you only got certain hosts back based on a criteria. So they both serve the role of taking other inventories and then compiling a list of like a subset of hosts from multiple other inventories based on a criteria. But it works in like an Ansible sub-process. So it actually runs in the control plane execution environment, and then that's saved to the constructed inventory, which then you can run jobs against. So I'm sorry, I came here not having the full presentation right in front of me. If you want to come back to me, I can show some more things, or I can just like follow up in a little bit here. How, or anybody else, do you have anything else that we should add right away about this topic?
A YouTube video demonstrating constructed inventory and its capability will be really nice if you want to collaborate on that.
Yeah, we could do that. I'm trying to get like another blog post going. This is all pretty open content, so it's like, but so it's out there somewhere. But I want to. We need to glue it together to show people, of course, because it tends to be pretty focused on the examples, because we think that's the main thing that people are going to have trouble with. Even if you just go into the UI currently, and then you just click the buttons in creating an inventory, there's a really nice pop-up in the UI that right there is going to have some examples to show the general like syntax of what it's going to be.
Do you mind if I take over the screen share and show that UI and navigate around there?
Not at all. Go right ahead.
All right, let me go ahead and do that. Having a demo cluster ready at all times. All right. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, can. Sorry, I should have closed on tabs, my bad. So here's how you get to the constructed inventory. And this is the how to use constructed inventory plugin section that Alan was talking about. And link to the core concept of what is a constructed inventory. Oh, no, man, this is our doc to it. Does it link to?
It'll be in there. I don't think that's gone live yet, which that's just going to be a temporary shortcoming here. But if you pull the drop down, the idea is that you would like copy that and then just put it into the box below.
Click the little expand button now. And then down here, there's a couple of different examples. There you go.
Right.
So for the people in the community, if you have an opportunity, please play around with constructed inventory. Let us know how you feel about it, and if there's any shortcoming that you guys find, please let us know. We are very excited about adding this feature. It is much more powerful than smart inventory.
Yeah, people complained about smart inventory, and the idea, well, not complain, but there's issues where there's very obvious functionality shortcomings, and we believe that this hits like exactly what those are. So smart inventories didn't deal with groups, so this is going through Ansible core. So what you expect should actually be there. There's a question. It depends on Ansible core 2.15, and yes, it does. So we have a very special kind of hack in there for the current release of AWX, which is that it has Ansible 2.14, but the specific addition that's needed from 2.15 was put in to the execution environment as a hack. And this runs in the control plane execution environment, which means that it's like the AWX EE, but we're taking control of that, and it should work is the bottom line.
I thought we misspelled. It's okay. We don't have to show that. I thought we removed that hack. It's just built off of Ansible. Anyway,
with 2.15, the hack's not necessary, right? But I just don't know about the timing of that, because I don't think Ansible core 2.15 is live yet. Maybe if we
There's
looked at
not.
it, maybe we could switch it over now, but it's not a big deal.
Gotcha. Yeah, we tested this. It works. Please play around with it. Please let us know how if you have any feedback. All right. Let me stop sharing. Lila, you can go ahead and take up back the share.
Sure thing. Alrighty. So next on the agenda, we're actually going to pass it back to Hal for UI next.
Oh, okay. Never mind. It's me again. Okay.
Alrighty.
So some of you may know, we did announce this, and some of you may have already noticed. If you navigate to the dashboard page of the old AWX UI that we all know and love, we now see a banner here, Tech Preview, and you can navigate to this. And this shows our new UI. By the way, dark mode. Yes. Sorry. But yeah, dark mode, and this is completely rewritten, not for dark mode, but like a lot of niceties in the frameworks. Is anyone here from the UI team here that want to go into a little bit more detail about this? Anyone? Okay. Unfortunately, I can't rope any of them to come talk.
Hi.
Yeah, please.
Oh, yeah, Vidya's there.
Vidya,
All the way.
Vidya, finally, awesome. If you want to, talk a little bit about the new UI.
Sure. So the new UI is basically built off of a shared UI framework. So we're trying to ensure consistency across different parts of the UI. And as you can see, we're making a few changes in how this data appears. So you can see one difference here is we have a list view, which can also be seen as a card view, and a table view. You can alter your settings. And we also have a user setting up top, I think third button on the right, where we can toggle things like compact layout, form columns, whether you want to see forms in multiple or single columns, and those settings get applied across the page. Yeah, and there's light and dark mode as well, based on user preference, how you want to see this data show up. Yeah, and this is currently in tech preview mode. So yeah, we are looking for more feedback on things we can improve. Not all features are implemented, but a lot of things are already available. Like you can see the projects list, jobs, teams, users, organizations.
Let's see. The new UI the code for the new UI can be found in the Ansible UI project in the Ansible org. For those who are interested in UI development. Anything else you want to bring up, Vidya?
No, I don't.
Yeah, please play around with the new UI. Let us know what's broken. Let us know what you like and don't like about the new UI. All right, I think that's it.
Okay, great. And we will pass it on over to Sean M-Sullivan to discuss infra config as code.
Okay, one moment. I have to get my screen up and go. Okay, here we go. So I'm bringing up basically what's known in the past as the Red Hat COP controller configuration, which is now the infra controller configuration collection, where we've basically taken the AWX collection and put it on steroids. Is kind of what we've done. You can export it using the AWX export command. Set up all of your things from the GUI into code. Like this is a thing for doing like notifications inside and basically setting them all up, the messages, everything like that. You have workflows with all of their nodes. Basically, we have documentation set up around all of the every single role, all the endpoints you need to use. You do labels. Basically, the idea is that you can set roles up to lock down the GUI, so in production, no one can make any changes. That's what you so wish. And all of it has to go through the Git repository, your Git pulls and PRs, and get approved in order to push it up to whatever to your AWX or your controller instance. So we have a specific role. We include a playbook with a dispatch role, and the dispatch role basically, we go through it. I'm trying to get it here. Has a setting where you can put the role list in as a variable in what order to go into the roles, and it will basically deploy everything. So I put up a demo here, and it's going to run through on here, do a little bit of pre-steps that we've set in for doing our internal testing. But like it'll set all of your settings depending on what you want to do it. Create your organizations, labels, users, teams, everything. And here, basically based on your what you've set in code. We also, and I haven't set up a demo for this, I have one for info AH configuration. It does much the same thing. It has plugins for basically doing all of the automation hub endpoints. You can publish collections. You can set your registries with indexes and sync them. You can set up these in a schedule on your controller to run nightly to update your community and your certified collections if you'd like, and things like that. They have all modules have roles around them. You can run them as config as code as well. And so I'm trying to pull up here. There's the roles in our GitHub. Select with the collection publish. I think these are just the examples. Where did the playbooks configs? That's what I was looking for. Like AH repositories. You set it all up in code for all of the endpoints of what you want to do, and go from there. You can even do the doc sites for your collections and things like that. It's running. We test it regularly. We try to keep up with the AWX collection and any hub updates. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Yes, I do know that we're going to be at Summit and Ansible Fest at Summit, and currently I think we have a lab for this, and they're upping it to 80 people each for the 2 labs because it's currently filled at 50. For doing configuration as code. If anyone's interested, it's on my Git repo, and I'll link it here in the chat for a guide of how to get it started.
Hey, John, I did have a question.
Yep.
So I have used this a little bit, and it's super cool. So I guess thanks for making it. I noticed there's these file tree create and some documentation around how to use those particular roles. I wonder, could you talk a little bit about that, and maybe coming from like a brownfield you already have AAP and some non-config as code resources created. Like, how would you go about converting it to use this?
So the file tree create currently uses the lookup plugin to basically do something similar to the AWX export. And what the file tree create does is it creates basically a opinionated version of how everything should be set up in the different orgs, and tries to export everything it can using templates and things like that to an opinionated way of exporting everything. So rather than doing like a backup and restore, or you're just getting started, you can export it into the files. It's very opinionated, and you have to have it set up exactly like it is with the file tree create, and in order to use the file tree read in there as well, because that's what the file tree read is set up basically to read the file tree create. We are looking at basically changing this over to using the export for an AWX CLI, which would be remove some of the need for templating and some of the limitations of it. But basically, if you go in, I'm trying to remember and find the examples they have of it. But basically, you run it and it creates all files for you, like the config that I showed you. And it does it with the different organizations. I don't have an example of it quite ready here at hand, so I can't really illustrate as much. Talking about some of the other features we have, we do have a object differential that will basically go through and find what's different between your loaded config and what is on the API, and basically spit out a differential of what things are there, should stay there, and what should be removed if you want to clean up the UI. We've been working on improving that as well, and that uses a lookup plugin. And we've even, the next update will have an update about setting defaults for every single option. So that way that people want it to be very opinionated and prevent drift. It will basically allow you to turn that on and have enforce your defaults across all the roles and everything, unless you changed it in code. I'm not sure if that answered your question, Matthew, but if you want to reach out afterwards, I can put you in touch with the people who've done the file tree create, and they'll be able to go a bit deeper into that.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
So any other questions? Okay, that was my presentation. As you said, you can see it's gone through here and created everything. It's created all of the roles that we set, workflows, everything in here. I know of at least, I think, 7 major companies, including Twitch, have been using it to basically do everything from get repos rather than people making changes in the GUI. Hey, it's not up to us. It's they're the ones using it. How
thank you very much, John. Thank you very much, Sean, for your presentation. Lila, what's on the agenda next?
Okay, great. So next.
Oh, by the way, Sean, where can we find the configuration as code repo, and how do people get started?
Sorry, my page was loading. I'm putting a link up here to the Galaxy page that lists all 4 of our collections. From there, the repos are linked underneath the Red Hat COP. If you want to get started, but the readmes are there, and you can either follow the export options or just get everything written. And it also, I forgot that I was going to go into this, but for there's an article blog on redhat.com where I basically distributed a workflow for other people to read and use. With all of its options, job templates, credentials, credential types, basically in a single file by defining everything in code. So that can also be useful for doing demonstrations where you want to be able to distribute the work that you've done with the controller to other people.
Awesome. Can you put the link in our Matrix channel? And I can copy that into the description for this video afterwards.
I will definitely do that.
Thank you very much, sir. All right.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have fix PostgreSQL reconnection in case of database failover or idle or unstable connection. And we have a few folks talking about that. So I will go ahead and transfer that over now.
Tanga?
Yep. Thank you guys for the time. Finally, I got it. So yeah, basically what I noticed during the deployment of AWX on unstable environment or something like high availability Postgres is that if we have some failover or I don't know, cluster Kubernetes not to resolve correctly the DNS of the server and so on, the main loop of AWX will not catch this unstable connection and not going to the error, that the path error that is already in place. So I've discussed by GitHub with Alan, I think easier. So basically we noticed that the main loop will not check, or the function inside the main loop will not check anytime if the connection is up and running, because the Python library is not working as is. So in Postgres, we don't have a lot of a type of ping or stable connection, something like this. So we need something that in a loop check if the connection in the thread is up and running, and also if it's working. So this simple solution that can create some heavy workload is here. So first of all, when we are in timeout in the PG notify, for example, or when we waiting the connection or we waiting the queue, the periodic task, let me say, if we go into the timeout, we simply do this command that is a sort of ping. So we ping the Postgres if with the current connection, if it's stable, everything is go well. If not, we go into the main function to the error. I know that in the last release with the task and the web container pod separation and so on, this function is called multiple time for multiple purpose. So this morning I'm trying to work on the suggestion of Alan to move on a sort of, let me say, for this main function to a sort of count. So not every time we go in the timeout we catch to the error, or we catch the information is in the bottom, but only when we upper then a counter that we need to decide, or something like this. So in this different branch, I try to go in the direction that Alan suggests. But anyway, the main point here is that in the background, in the main loop function of PG notify, when we establish new connection or connection in general, nobody check that this connection is up and running. And nobody ensure us that this connection is valid, because we simply create the connection and listen on a queue. And nobody check if we really listing it or not.
All right, thank you so much for bringing this up. And you're mentioning that this latest refactor here has to do with the fact that we're pulling in this listening logic for a couple of more services as a result of doing the web and task split work as in like multiple container pods now. They are looking out for a certain message being sent over PG notify to like reconfigure or do something else. Or clear Redis. I think there's the other one that Redis is duplicated so that these pods can scale independently of each other. And then because of that, we had to have another listener in the web pod to clear the values there. So then the idea here is that obviously, like the case that you're likely to hit this probably is an OpenShift. And in those cases, like we don't want, like we need to fix it. This is going to have to be fixed for all those together. So you can't have the web pod stop listening either. And for the background, what I keep coming back to here is I try to clarify for everybody that we have two connections that the dispatcher uses, because one connection is just for ordinary code, ordinary anything done with the Django or ORM. It uses one connection there, but we open up a new connection for the purpose of listening to PG notify. And that's where the problem is. And that takes a very different kind of code path. So it's less surprising for us to find out that there's something going wrong there. And we had gone through testing. We had some coverage of some scenarios like the database dropping connections, but it seems like that doesn't catch this. So like I really appreciate this work coming in and hitting, you're coming in, you're finding scenarios that we're not hitting on our own. And can you tell us a little bit about what setup you're finding this behavior in? So I think it was called out specifically that you had Postgres set up the failover. So then the way that works, it's you have like you have multiple nodes and you have the backup, and you're kind of connected to the same point, but then it switches from the primary to the backup that's like the streaming replication, right? And then when that happens, you found here that connection went dead. Like it's because it's listening. It's kind of like it doesn't know if it's not getting any messages, or it's not the Postgres server isn't actually using the socket anymore, right?
Yep. So the scenario is that. So I have a cluster Kubernetes with AWX. So we single replica in this moment, and we have 3 or more Postgres in HA. So in availability with PC bouncer or without. In all cases, we have one virtual IP address where we can reach the Postgres, and then the VIP address. Let me say we manage everything. So what's happened when in the background one instance go to another one, because I don't know, I turn off a VM, where is the master, let me say. So probably in the background nobody drop or send a drop message to the connection, to the PG connection that is in place. So this is why probably actually the PG notify not receive any drop down. In the main loop, the Django connection receive correctly. And due to the fact that, let me say, the failover in this case is very fast because is a 2 or 3 or 5 seconds. For Django, everything is, I don't know if it's transparent or let me say it's very fast. So no problem. For this type of connection, where in the backend, behind the VIP address, for example, something changing in socket and so on, nothing go up. Other scenario that I notice the same behavior is inside the cluster Kubernetes, for example, when we have a core DNS inside the Kubernetes itself. And for example, and we use it for route the traffic inside the containers pod and so on in all namespace. So we use it as a DNS, internal DNS in lab environment, obviously. So in this scenario, for example, we have the main resolver inside the Kubernetes and the secondary resolver outside the Kubernetes that sometimes is not aligned with the inside, let me say. So the service is not routable because nobody know the Postgres service itself. So the DNS is not able to resolve the DNS. So we receive for the Django main loop the error, but inside the PG notify and so on still up and listen. So we need to restart or we need to force the kill of the main process to resolve it. Actually, I noticed, or we have two possible solutions from my point of view. The first of all is this one. So try to find some mechanism to check the connection. Or I remember, I don't know if it's in production, is merged, is the usage of liveness and probeness on Kubernetes with a command to check if the task container respond correctly to the notify, or if we have some issue with CLI, have you AWX manage CLI? But this is the scenario, obviously. It's not a standard scenario where everything is up and running. But in some discussion with other people in Matrix, someone noticed also this type of behavior on Azure in the Kubernetes environment with external Postgres, because sometimes the connection is not stable, or there is a drop-down connection from managed services from Postgres. So the main loop is this one.
Thanks for that summary. I agree. I really like your separation of the two different approaches to the problem. That makes a lot of sense to me, because I've wanted to go in the direction of trying to have the health checks get responsiveness from PG Notify. But unfortunately, I think my issue with option number 2 that you mentioned, I just want to say it here, is that it could be hard to get that to work in the VM installs, because it would presumably still be an issue. Somebody could be using Postgres with failover, not with a Kubernetes deployment. And because of that, I think that your current approach with like some kind of periodic check is what I currently lean towards. But I'm really, like, if anybody else has any feedback, like, I'm interested to hear that too, right? I think my issue with doing it, so you could do it with like a liveliness probe that would work, right? But then that would only work for Kubernetes. And then the wall that I run into when I think about doing it internally through the health checks, for instance, is that if an instance isn't responding to PG Notify, then you can't talk to it anyway. So even if you could ascertain that a node wasn't working, you couldn't really. It's hard to know exactly what you would do in response to fix that. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay,
You're
great.
welcome.
Thank y'all so much. And we have two additions to our agenda. So I'll go ahead and share that now. Okay, so we'll go ahead and start this discussion. I just wanted to go ahead and show a slide of what we would be discussing, and I will go ahead and share the presentation mode.
Hey, I guess I'm a first-time contributor, so maybe should I just take over the presentation?
You sure can.
Let's see here. Cool. So this is at the suggestion of Sean, I think, is discuss this, which I think is a great idea. But this is a super simple idea, and the use case here is, using the AWX collection. We want, and the config as code concepts that Sean presented and demoed earlier. We want to configure some resources, specifically some credentials in AWX, and we don't necessarily, we know what they should be called, but if they already are present, we don't want to overwrite them, especially in the case of credentials, that could erase them. So it's kind of like that safety issue. Sean does have like if you're still on, Sean, I assume you are, a way to kind of go around this and do this, but this is another option, and the existential state would essentially just be, if it exists, don't do anything to it. So this is an extremely simple change, and as you can see, like the change itself is like 4 lines, and it's just, if it exists, we're done because we don't have to do anything. So the options here in this proposition, I guess, is this useful? It doesn't seem like it adds a lot of complexity, and it gives us the functionality that we want. And if that's true, do we want to add it to the other modules that are maybe relevant here? So maybe the notification credentials, and potentially the other resources as well.
I was rethinking this based on something we had come up in our controller configuration, is that if it exists, it should not just exit. It should just not update the inputs. It should basically skip updating the inputs, because that way it can, if someone's using the module and invoking it, it will then, you can update the credential, like the description or the other fields without touching the inputs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. That's interesting. I think, yeah, that should be able to be, that seems like it should not be difficult to add if you just want to not change the relevant parts of the credential, or like just the description.
Well, I meant like what I would do is I'd change it basically further down. It's like if state exists and credential is not none, so the exiting, you basically just don't set the inputs. If you scroll, I think if you, I'm not looking at your code, but if you press the down button on 278 at the bottom of that file that you're in right now.
Yeah.
No,
left hand side.
we don't like necessarily have like a
here.
Yeah, there's a down button. Yep. So right there, if you basically added it above in 283 and basically shifted inputs over, that would achieve it.
Okay.
Instead of exiting.
Okay. That seems pretty simple. Yeah.
And the thing is, we basically just have to determine what is and what isn't state, or we could, I think that's what you want to do, and then It's depending on what the other sensitive changes we'd want to make to other modules. Because I think that makes this more functional rather than just exiting if it exists. If that makes sense. Does anyone else have any thoughts on this? Or should we just keep it as is?
Alan, did you want to ask your question?
I hope I'm following the discussion accurately, right? So description is a good example of a field that's just kind of random. Like you can change it, but it's not kind of like critical for anything. And generally, like name and organization are most commonly used to look up the item. In other cases, there's going to be another object mixed in there. Like if you have a host, you need the inventory, which itself has an organization associated with it. So then it's like those are used, like the idea, if there was an idea behind the collection, is that those are the things that you would use to look it up. And then otherwise, like, I'm not sure, what do you have in mind? Like, what would be like a sensitive versus a not sensitive field? I don't know where you would draw that line. I thought that the exists notion made sense. It's simple to explain, right? If you're going for a state exists, then you just check that it exists, and if it exists, you just move on.
We could just keep it as that. If it exists, move on and keep it as is. More of I was trying to like apply like we were going through is like if someone hasn't defined a default execution environment, do you set null and basically do the default omit field, or do you do the empty quotation marks so that way that it forces it to be nothing when you submit it to the API and that sort of thing. And I think maybe that's more of on the collection / role level than the module level. Like you said, like you can put like we could institute that with an if else thing to basically not provide that field versus having it inside of the module itself. So it's basically what is the purpose of these? Do we want to just do a state exists for everything and just have it be blanket? If it exists, we don't actually do anything, or are we looking to skip fields?
Yeah, I guess if you're asking for my input, keeping it simple makes the most sense to me. It is just like a very simple concept.
I was just basically brainstorming, and so yeah, I think if this is a concept, keep it simple is probably the best.
Yeah, and I guess if there's not any other further comments, should I go ahead and attempt to implement this for other modules? Is that like the path forward here?
I guess one question I want to throw out here is, like, this is a pretty small amount of code. Would there be much of any shared utilities between the modules? We want to, like, if it's general, like, you want to keep things general if you can, but this looks awfully simple in implementation, and that the changes happen in the module level.
I don't think you'd put it in module utilities. It was more maybe, but it'd be like you'd basically be invoking a definition, and the definition only exited.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess moving it to module utils seems like it might create more work than just adding like those 4 lines to the individual modules.
I imagine if you added the module utils, you'd only basically be changing 270. The module exit, which is also already a thing.
Yeah, so I guess I'm totally open to any ideas. Like I said, this is the first contribution that I'm making. So yeah, any assistance is helpful.
This is a really good. Sorry. Way too many different mics. My apologies. This is a really good contribution. Thank you very much, Matthew. I think one of the way going forward here is we can take this for the just the credential, and then try to expand from the pattern to other places where we have encrypted values. Alan, what do you think? We can do this in steps, is what I'm saying.
Or encrypted.
Is there
I-
any
I-
place we have encrypted?
Notification credentials, I believe.
That's still a credential. The notification credential should only be the name of the credential, not the value.
Like, for Alan's comment earlier about extracting it into module utils, is there any other places that needs this?
The user
You're
module
muted,
has
Sean.
password, but John was working on that.
Sean, you muted.
Sorry, I was thinking Alan's right. The user module has a password. It would be useful for doing it there.
Okay.
And I think I was muted before. I was saying to Matthew is the notification credential should be the credential name, not the encrypted value.
Oh, okay, cool. Thanks.
We can do that is just merge or get this into a place that we can merge it, and then do we want to open issues to track it for the other ones?
Sure.
Do you mind doing that, Matthew, or do you want me to?
But,
I can
yeah,
do
I really like this contribution, by the way. This is awesome. Thank you very much.
Just making sure we don't forget it. That's really what I'm after.
Yeah, when someone else found the other one, they will remember to open it. It will be fine.
We got 2 minutes. What do we got here?
Oh, we only have 2 minutes left. Oh no.
I think the other contribution, I think Tang open or something like that, but I think Mike is reviewing that now for the UI stuff.
Tanga, do you want to take a moment to talk about the UI problem that we recently introduced? By the way, thank you very much for pushing for a fix for this. My apologies for forgetting about it several times. I finally trapped Michael Bastian down today and says, yeah, look at this. So he looked at it today.
Yeah. I'm in discussion with the team, so I think this will be approved today. Generally, in the new implementation, new PR that is related to the language was introduced done a regression in terms of fixing. So for whole user that do not have a browser in one of the supported language by AWX, for example, Italian or German and so on, and it have or all of them have a browser in their language, UI is still blank. So you need to pass a parameter on URL to force the English or other language that you want. So I simply propose this PR to roll back one checking that is not fetched correctly in the merged. And I notice also now that the test inside the AWX will not cover this, let me say, use case. So probably also we need to add a test for not supported language that is not included in this PR.
It's I will not pretend like I know anything about UI. In Matrix, I pinged you a PR that Mike Bastian made on top of your changes. I think that should cover all the other languages, right? Would that ping him? PR number 13832. Oh, never mind. It's closed. But rest assured, our UI team knows about this and we're working on it. Thank you for reporting this and thank you for pushing for this. We sometimes have short attention spans. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you. We're at time too.
All right, we are at time. Just some closing words. Lila, please. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for everyone for speaking. Just throwing out some contributed thanks to our first-time contributors here. And then we will migrate on over to general Q&A and discussion. Do we want to stop the recording or continue with Q&A with the recording going?
Before we move on to the Q&A, I want to make a little bit of a change to how the SPUTS award is given out. I want to give a place where people can upvote fellow community members for their contribution. Details are scarce right now. I have not sat down to think about how where these voting can happen. But if you notice any fellow community member or if anyone in the community helped you, or if you notice good contribution in the community, please help us by shouting them out in Element. And I know we haven't discussed this, but we haven't discussed this in detail of how do we want the mechanic of this voting system to work. If you have any ideas, please let us know. I think that's about it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Hal. And if you will stop the recording, I think we're ready to progress into Q&A.